welcome to this webinar by PAVe. We're so glad you're joining on a Monday during the workday. My name is Christina Corral. I'm PAVe's education manager and I helped set this up. I'll be back on at the end for a minute just to talk about a current advocacy campaign we have going on. Be sure to drop questions in the Q&A as we go along. I'm sure everybody's used to that by now and it needs no instruction. But we will try to incorporate those as we go along where they're relevant, and hopefully we'll have time at the end for Q&A as well. And we may drop some links in the chat throughout. So look out there if we're talking about specific links or resources. So here are our speakers, and I'm going to turn it over to Bruce Barslow to get started. We have so many people on, I think we should just go ahead because it's going to be a packed hour.
Yeah, it is. We have a lot to cover. So as you can see, we're all volunteers, parents, grandparents, Gampies. We are individuals who have kids who may have vaped or are vaping. The contents that we're going to cover today are all about protecting kids. We'll introduce ourselves as we go through the webinar today. My name's Bruce Barslow. I'm with Montgomery County Adamus. I also am the Director of Implementation for Solder Technology. This fall, I'll also be teaching a course at Boonshaw School of Medicine. So again, we'll be introducing each other, ourselves as we go through today. Next slide. So we'll be covering a lot of different content. We'll be covering the national epidemic of youth vaping, the predatory, pernicious actions of big tobacco, why teens vape, certainly the impact of the health harms of vaping, and then what parents can do, what caring adults. I noticed that when we started looking at who had signed up for today's webinar, that there were some school counselors, educators, so all caring adults, what they can do. We're real pleased that this is the second Ohio-focused webinar that we've had. The last one we had during the evening, so we're excited to see what having one during mid-afternoon. So again, we're just real excited that you're here with us today. Next slide. So how did PAVe come about? Well, it really started in 2018, right? A Juul representative had gotten into a school of 3 certain moms, and their kids were in the 9th grade at that time. And under the guise of a health presentation of all things, with no adults in the room, students were told that though it was just for adults, Juul was totally safe and would soon be approved by the FDA. Both of those statements were lies. And I love it that Meredith says that they messed with the wrong moms, and that's exactly what has happened. And you can see that while PAVe may have started with a small group of determined moms, that it quickly grew into a national parent voice on the youth vaping epidemic, and largely led by volunteers across the country. PAVe has been part of a successful campaigns to get legislation passed across the country. And as we continue to grow, and we hope if you haven't been or signed up to be part of PAVe, that you certainly will do so, that you'll be part of the PAVe volunteer network. And you can see from the middle that PAVe was part of the White House forum on vaping in 2019. So if there's some good news that in 2020, the youth vaping rates actually dropped. The reasons, well, there's some speculation on why. The hard work of many different organizations, good prevention, but just remember this, that the rates that they dropped to, the 3.6 million, are the same rates as in 2018, those exact rates that then FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb called the vaping epidemic. So there's still a lot of real concern. The bad news is that youth are vaping more. Though the youth that are vaping at higher rates, and they're vaping more frequently. 22.5% are using daily. So even though the rates have dropped, those that are vaping more, and that's a real concern. The blue line represents cigarette smoking amongst 10th graders. So you can see that continual drop. Again, good news. In 1997, more than around 1 in 4 youths smoked, where in 2018, less than 1 in 20. So that's been a great decline and a continual decline. But the red line shows a totally different story amongst 10th graders and in high school, middle school as well. Just look at that difference between 2017 and 2018. The vaping rates almost doubles. And that's largely due to the launch of Juul and their social media campaign. Another real concern then is, because we know that research tells us that youth that vape have 4 times more chance of using combustible cigarettes, we will be watching that trend if that combustible using traditional cigarettes increases with time as well. It's a real concern. So then how about, what are the Ohio numbers? And here's the different data points on Ohio usage. You can see the current Ohio youth rates, 30%. Adult rates are terrible. I don't know if you know this or not, but Ohio is lumped in with a group of states that's considered tobacco nation. 13 states with the highest smoking rates. The most northern states of the tobacco nation: Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana, because of the high smoking rates. Ohio youth smoking rates, 21% here in Montgomery County, 23% adult smoking rate. So adults don't fare very well. So those are just some of the data points.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for actually setting the tone and, providing the data of the significance. My name is Dr. Monica Wilson. I am a professor of psychology, as well as a parent and an advocate, and so grateful to be here with you all today to present on this serious topic. As you see, my slide is going to cover the youth marketing and predatory practices that literally guide and direct our youth to actually having to have the experience of vaping and the implications that they may have in their lives. So basically, this slide shows that you've been Juuled. Juul really led the way in 2017 with a heavy social media push that set out to target our youth and created the youth vaping epidemic. Juul said that they were trying to appeal to adult smokers at the time to get them to switch to e-cigarettes. But these, as you see, these ads tell a complete different story. They're bright, youthful, vaporized campaign launch included parties with models and DJs, all those things that are appealing to a youth audience. And literally drawing them into areas where young people would actually be centralized and like I said, targeted specifically to them through these ads to draw them in. Juul is actually currently being sued around the country for marketing practices because it appears that they have been directly targeting our youth. Like I said, using young models, using social media influencers, advertising on social media that specifically targeting teens. And there have been even a few e-cigarette companies advertising on Quizlet. Now, Quizlet is a website used specifically for kids that are to make flashcards. Can you all believe that? And so they have had ads literally on Quizlet. And through the pandemic, this was really an issue because it was heavy marketing on those sites and that particular site at the time. And I'm proud to say that PAVe was really a key advocate and a part of a congressional hearing where Juul was taken to task for their marketing practices because of the story you heard earlier about the Juul rep coming into one of our founders' son's schools. And I can tell you that also happened at my daughter's school. And so we have been pushing back with this marketing predatory practices that are literally targeting our youth, drawing them into an area, making it seem like, vaping is appealing and not harmful to them. And we know that it is. 90% of addiction occurs before the age of 21. So if companies can get our kids hooked before the age of 21, they are far more likely to have these kids as lifelong customers, and that's really their goal. These addictive products and their marketing really to get our kids hooked quickly and addicted as soon as possible makes it so hard to quit. Many don't know that nicotine is as addictive as heroin. And you all can give feedback in the chat on this. How many of you knew that? That literally the implications of the addictive properties of nicotine is a very hard drug, very difficult to wean off of, and the side effects are horrific, especially for a young person as well. And we know especially hard for those developing brains. They are growing, they're changing, and so a substance like nicotine early interferes with what we call the dopamine reward pathways, which affects every aspect of a young person's development, and obviously they're being able to wean off of something like this. So here we have on this slide, thank you so much, Christina, for sharing it. Juul literally has more examples of their digital advertising via social media and direct marketing. And as you see, they put all these little blurbs, and early Juul used social media influencers. Like I said, that's one of the really biggest ways to get our young people to be gravitated to something like this. And they use social media celebrity influencers, made this a lifestyle, made it try to be cool. And literally, like I said, targeting young people. There was an email actually from April 2020 from a popular vape company called Puff Bar, which refers to a spring break and escaping from parents' texts. And while featuring young people, looking like models and just having the time of their lives. So you can escape, you can literally get away, you don't have to do it with your parents, do this vaping, and Puff Bar was really pushing this. Juuls and others would actually launch parties specifically to garnish young people to begin to vape. Now they actually, we talked about the lawsuit, and others have since obviously shut down their social media campaigns. And they don't do it often because the damage is already done. The young people who are using, and you saw the data, are literally the largest individuals now on social media sites taking pictures of themselves in classrooms while their teachers are having their back turned, writing a lesson, and posting them smoking vaping on social media. So kids are literally posting this and promoting vaping themselves, and now are the largest advertisers for these companies. The internet has been filled with memes created by kids about how important it is for their jewel, and making cartoons and things of that nature. So literally, like I said, now the company doesn't have to do it. They've gotten these kids to do it naturally, and the marketing is horrific. Go to the next slide. So we know that also, marketing from cigarettes to versus e-cigarettes was the big push. You'll see on the left of the slide, which is dots of endorsing cigarette smoking, new companies suggesting that you can vape now with vitamins. Have you all ever heard of such, vaping with vitamins, essential oils, literally melatonin? These are the new class of vaping products, and they are not regulated like nicotine, vapes, or tobacco products are. And then on the right of the slide, you'll see the old Marlboro Man and an ad for Blue's e-cigarette by Imperial Brands, which is one of the largest cigarette companies in the United States. And these companies many are the same companies and people marketing aggressively to find new customers, to literally replace the 50% of regular smokers who, we know the cigarette kills. So the same companies that own Marlboro invested $13 billion in Juul in 2018. So we've just gone from one pendulum of horrific habits. Now it's targeting our youth, and these companies have spent billions of dollars literally in these products to get our young people hooked. Next slide. And it goes specifically to the next slide, please. The predatory practices that the tobacco industry actually targets and how they target. A powerful basin, as you see, is the tobacco advertising, really focusing on cigars and vaping with flavors, also used by companies, and they advertise these things in gas stations, convenience stores, smoke shops, all of those things. And so the predatory practices literally lend themselves largely to the exposure of the tobacco industry. And many of these populations, the LGBTQ, former military, low income neighborhoods, racial minorities, Native Americans, people with mental illness, literally these are the point of sale that are targeting individuals in these areas to begin to start using these products. The next slide will really leads to that the predatory practices actually go in directly to the menthol. Now, menthol has a history of targeting Black and African Americans specifically. And one of the worst examples is big tobacco targeting these communities with menthol. And one of the reasons why is because menthol it makes starting smoking easier. Literally, it numbs the throat. You don't have the effects automatically because it's smoother. The aerosol that's in it is less harsh to inhale. So meaning you can take a deep draw and it just not choke you out. So according to the FDA, in 2013, a report on the public health impact of menthol cigarettes provided evidence that suggested that menthol in cigarettes is less likely associated with increased irritation and progression of regular cigarette smoking. They also stated that the adequate suggested that menthol use is less likely with increase of sensation for youth and young adults. So the actual, like I said, the marketing practices, the predatory practices specifically has 85% of African-American smokers using menthol because of this. And the data actually knows that it creates greater addiction. And the lifelong effects is the customer aspect that I mentioned earlier in a slide. There's actually a mini documentary if you all want to look more deeply into this, and I recommend it. It's called Black Lives, Black Lungs. You can find it on the website. Just type in Black Lives, Black Lungs.com so that you can see that. But like I said, you know, because of this, the predatory marketing, the advertising to our youth, the advertising to underserved communities, we have a epidemic right now in our country where individuals are literally addicted to these products, and our young people are getting exposed to them early on, and it is a crisis that we are hoping to be able to address today by what we're presenting. Judy?
Oh, Bruce, you're on mute.
Judy will join us. She may have gotten bounced off for a second. But so was there a flavor ban? And the reality is that certainly there were thousands of different flavors before the flavor ban. And what was impacted, I remember when the flavor ban went where I was when the FDA announced that there was going to be a flavor ban. I was in Bismarck, North Dakota, and speaking to an administrative conference. And the governor spoke just before I did, and the governor said, this is going to solve all of our vaping problems. And I got up right after he did, and I said, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but this vaping ban is not going to solve all of our problems. And I'll let
yeah, I'm
Judy.
Sorry.
No,
I'm Dr. Judy Groner. I'm having a little technical problem with Zoom. Hopefully that is solved. It is a little bit strange today. Anyway, thank you for holding the space. I'm Dr. Judy Groner. I'm a primary care pediatrician from Columbus, Ohio at Nationwide Children's Hospital. And I've been active in pediatric tobacco issues for a really long time, and also with the American Academy of Pediatrics. So I am really pleased to be on this webinar. Just a second. Okay. The flavor ban. So that kind of came in, and I think one of the things about vaping issues is it is very confusing because you hear that something's going to happen and you think that's going to fix it, but there are so many carve outs that it really doesn't matter. So the thing that happens, and my theme here is the evolution. So as soon as a flavor ban comes in, the new disposable vapes came in, and guess what? A flavor ban did not apply to disposable vapes. Then e-liquids, things that are sold commercially to like fit into your Juul that may not have flavors anymore. So you can just refill your Juul with a flavored e-liquid. So just think about when you buy your iPhone, you may buy all the accessories from the iPhone company, but there's a lot of companies that will buy things that will fit with your iPhone. So it's the same thing with Juul. If Juul is not allowed to have flavors in the actual Juul brand, no worries, because there's a bunch of other companies that are going to go out there and sell these flavored pods, and all you have to do is stick them in. So that doesn't solve anything. And then we heard so much from Dr. Wilson about menthol, and menthol being a carve out. Menthol has always targeted the African American community and also the youth community. Most youth who use cigarettes start with menthol also. So we can see that there was probably a lot of negotiation. They kept menthol in because if this e-product is a gateway to other tobacco forms and nicotine forms, then you can see that having it come in smoothly is going to be the way to really hook people, and then they'll just move on with their nicotine addiction. Next slide, please. So another important thought here when we think about marketing is not just the social media, but what the products look like. And, you know, they're cute. They look like, not like cigarettes. They look like cute little devices, things that may stick into your computer. And so this is a whole lot of the disposables. I don't even know what they do to their environment when you throw them out, because I'm sure that they don't really dispose of themselves. But there was no flavor ban in disposables. So are you surprised that there was 1,000% rise of the disposables in 2020, right after the flavor ban that hit Juul and some of the other companies. And these are just some pictures with the open and throw it away. So by the time you get home, your parent's not going to really find any evidence of this. So that is part of the ever-changing kind of morphology of what an e-cigarette looks like. Next slide. And these are the pod-based ones. This is the typical Juul, and it says learn how to refill on YouTube. So basically, you can buy other inserts, not the ones that they no longer sell the fruity flavors for Juul, but you can buy other companies and just insert it into your Juul. So these are definitely the pod-based, but you can get around the flavor ban very, very easily. I'm sure there never really was a flavor ban. And these are the e-liquids, which are the refillables, the types of things that people put into their e-cigarettes. And again, just take a look at like the gummy flavor, even the pictures, the bubble gum, the slime green, all of the flavorings that come along with the nicotine. And we'll be talking about flavorings in a little bit in terms of safety, but just again, does this look like marketing to youth with a picture of like the Pop-Tarts, the Puff Tarts, the gummy bears? Okay, and the next slide. And then we get other nicotine products. The Pixatine on the right is the original nicotine toothpick. So that has nicotine embedded on a toothpick. There's the Velo Lucy gum is nicotine gum, but it's not like approved of for smoking cessation like other gums are for smoking cessation. There's lozenges and there's pouches. And basically these are going to be devices that people who are addicted to nicotine use kind of in between times when they can't, get to either their cigarettes or their vapes. They're going to be, searching for these types of things to keep their nicotine addiction going. And then finally, the wellness vapes or diffusers, which have like essential oils and other products in them. And I find that, these are very interesting because they're trying to mimic the wellness industry by literally telling people to put stuff into their lungs that's suspended in glycerin or propylene glycol and inhale it. And we may mention it again, but I'm going to mention it now that all of these, many of these flavorings have been labeled as GRAS or generally recognized as safe by the FDA, but those were literally to eat them, to put them in your stomach. So your lungs are not the same as your stomach. Small particles get into your lungs, can get into your heart. They have different effects in that area of the body. So just because you can take something like vanilla, let's say, and you could have it as part of your food does not translate that you should be inhaling vanilla. Okay, and next slide. Okay, and back to Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you so much. So we have now gone over, the youth targeting marketing campaigns, the affordability, the accessibility of these products, and all of the flavors that entice, and in this case, menthol, make it easier to use these products by cooling and numbing the throat. So we see that though the data shows that at least 37% of those using flavored products use menthol, we are quite confident that it's much higher because there are many flavored products that include menthol along with fruit or other flavors that are enticing to a youth audience, and they are typically called iced. Iced products because of the cooling effect that they have. So kids using, for example, an iced mango or an iced blue raspberry, don't they sound like they're targeting youth and it sounds delicious to do? May not know that the report that they are using a menthol product, but it would be easier and less harsh for them to use it. And so we see that on our slide, among high schoolers alone, 85% of them use flavored products. That is where the hook comes from. That is where they literally get the draw because these companies are making these products to entice them based upon flavors that they may find appealing. And it, you know, like I said, it sensationalizes it for them and gives them the perception that it's less harsh because you have mango and raspberry, right? You're doing fruit and vegetables in vaping. So it's all definitely manipulation of marketing to our young people. Next slide, please. And also, reasons why teens vape. Literally, when you think about it, kids are susceptible, obviously, to peer pressure. And it has been marketed that it's safer than cigarettes. It's like, it's not harmful. You know, you just always hear that they're safer to use. But these products we know are not safe for kids. And again, we don't care what adults do, but we know that these are not safe for kids. We know that Juul and other e-cigarettes are actually less expensive overall that are combustible cigs. And so now you have the price margin. We have, or we hear our medical experts that there's always a connection between substance use and mental health for those youth who start vaping. And often kids will use drugs like nicotine to self-medicate in order to deal with whatever stresses that they may be contending with. And they have an underlying diagnosis of a mental illness. Many times, you know, when we're dealing with anxiety and depression, even as adults, our coping can go to things that are harmful to us. Well, this is being marketed to our teens as something that literally will help them with their stressors. And they're dealing with a lot of school pressure. They're dealing with a lot of social pressure. And since the pandemic, I can tell you that 3 out of 4 students have been calling into supportive lines to help them. I know Ohio has this, where literally youth are able to call in if they're dealing or struggling with anxiety and depression. And one of the questions is, well, what are you doing to mitigate those factors? And vaping is one of those areas that 3 out of 4 youth are using to cope with their stress. So because of these new form of nicotines that are found in these e-cigarettes, kids get a strong head rush as soon as they start, within seconds, which is very alluring, so they feel something right away. And one thing is that these products are very accessible. Like I mentioned earlier, they have them at the gas stations, they have them at the convenience stores, they have them, you know, anyone under 21 actually has been able to get access to them. And a lot of times, obviously, if they have older siblings who are vaping, they can get access to those directly in the home. So it's, like I said, something that is definitely available to them. Unfortunately, a lot more than we would like to see. And the reasons why some of these locations don't even ask for ID. And I know kids that are young as 12 and 13 years old who've been able to get access to vaping products right in the communities, going into a liquor store. Next slide.
Yeah, so just one of my favorite individuals that talks about menthol is Dr. Phil Gardner, and his favorite, my favorite comment that he makes is that menthol makes the poison go down smoother. And so I just wanted to say that. So when we talk about the difference between the traditional cigarette and vaping is, and one big takeaway that we want you to have is simply is that, especially the new e-cigs that are out, there's just, because they are made with nicotine salts, they're so much more highly addictive because of the nicotine content. So you'll remember, if you've ever tried a traditional combustible cigarette, the first time, if you've tried one for yourself, you probably coughed. Why? Because it's harsh to inhale, right? Very few people that I've ever known, and I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people attempt to quit. Did they just start smoking, and it was an easy thing to do because they're harsh, and We also know that kids that have tried to smoke and pretty easy to detect because of the smell of traditional combustible cigarettes. The new forms, as we've been talking about several different things, they're because of the way that they're made, the nicotine salts combined with benzoic acid gets it to into the bloodstream very, very quickly. Dr. Wilson talked about then how that gets them that head rush right away. In one of the new books out, Big Vape, The Insidious Rise of Juul, it talks about as they were testing out the chemistry, how much nicotine they could actually pack in the Juul. They to test the limit, pushing it to the very limit. Individuals, and I'm sorry if I get graphic here, literally would start throwing up, getting nauseous and throw up because they wanted the very most nicotine they could possibly put in that product as they possibly could. They talked about, very proud to tell individuals as they marketed this product that the Juul could get 80% of what's in it in the pod into your lungs, compared to a combustible cigarette where it gets 1 to 2% of what's in a combustible cigarette into your lungs. I mean, think about it. You hit it, you exhale, probably are outside and talking, and then you hit it again. With these products, as you hit it, you take it away, and there's no second. If you hit it and hit it. The other thing is, as they continue, I'm sorry, you're not going to see my other products because I have a filter on. Let me change that just real quick. The change? It's not changing. Anyway, so some of these new products, they have, it's not wanting to let me change. Anyway, you can't see it, and I'm so sorry. This product by Random, it has SpongeBob SquarePants, and I'll try to get it fixed, but 2,400 puffs off of this puppy. And so a combustible cigarette has a finite number of hits off of it before it's done. These new products, you have multiple. It's hard to know when you're completed with it. Next slide. So what are the chemicals in these products? Early on, Juul listed literally 4 chemicals in the product. Stanford University researchers, chemists identified certainly many more chemicals in it. Rubidium, formaldehyde, cadmium. Dr. Judy listed the grass products that were generally recognized as safe. And so we know that many of these other products, when they're heated, the product itself, as it starts breaking down, can heavy metals. Some of these products are carcinogenic, and as we continue to do research, we are going to understand what these chemicals and identify more and more of them becoming toxic and are dangerous.
Okay, so we've heard a lot about nicotine addiction, and I think when we talk about how vaping affects the body, we'll start with the brain. The younger a person is, the more susceptible they are to addiction, and we've heard that menthol and flavors are what attracts youth, and that the nicotine salts are a now time-tested way of delivering kind of a rewarding amount of nicotine, because let's face it, if nicotine doesn't reach the brain, there's kind of no reason for people to do this. So we need to have, I mean, if you're a company that's making these products, you need to have something that works from that standpoint. So our youth are definitely more prone than older people to become addicted because their brain is still developing. And research has shown that nicotine per se causes permanent cognitive changes such as worsened memory, processing speed, and impulse control. Now, some of these youth, as Dr. Wilson said, may be using these vapes to cover baseline anxiety and depression, to feel better and self-medicating rather than getting to the core of whatever those issues are. But for others, these vaping may actually be the cause because their biochemistry is out of whack from the anxiety and depression. Some of them may be so wired from the constant nicotine use during the day that they may then vape THC at night, and that just causes just too much biochemical changes in the brain and can literally cause anxiety and depression in and of itself. So yes, so then we have the lungs, and we mentioned before that it is not water that people are vaping and nothing goes into their lungs. The aerosol does contain heavy metals, ultrafine particles, which we'll come back to, and many different chemicals. The flavorings are not safe for inhalation. Some of the particulates that are tiny can reach very deep into the lungs, causing irritation and inflammation. There is the potential to irritate the lungs, causing asthma. And the particulate matter, the tiny, tiny particles that go into the lungs, then ends up in the cardiovascular circulation and can cause cardiovascular disease. There's a known link between particulate matter and cardiovascular disease and chronic lung disease. But what's really important to realize, and I see this with youth, is that they're starting out maybe baseline healthy. So they may actually have some lung damage that they don't even realize they have unless it's over time where they get sicker and sicker. So it could be that they perceive that they're feeling well until they reach a point that they're vaping constantly and their lungs are just a mess. Next slide, please. Okay, we mentioned the heart. So nicotine is a stimulant. It restricts blood flow and increases blood pressure, adrenaline, and the heart rate. The flavor chemicals may be toxic to heart cells. And then, as I mentioned before, particulate matter, fine particulates are definitely damage the entire cardiovascular system. And the next slide. There's also evidence of the weakened immune system. Seizures from nicotine poisoning is really terrifying. There can be weight loss, GI issues with chronic vaping. And then also vaping affects the mouth microbiome, or the type of bacteria that live well within our host as a body, which can definitely affect immune response and cause disease downstream. So it's really, really abnormal to your entire system to be to vape all the time, or to vape at all. And then remember, EVALI, we had a lot about that kind of before COVID came out, but it stands for e-cigarette vaping associated lung injury. And there were a lot of cases of adults and youth getting extremely ill with severe lung injury, high fever, respiratory collapse, drastic weight loss. There were nearly 3,000 cases and 70 deaths from this as of February 2020. And then the CDC stopped tracking, and then we got into COVID, which I also wonder if we're missing cases of EVALI because it starts to look like COVID after a while. It was linked to THC vaping and the use of vitamin E acetate in those vapes. But interestingly, about 15 to 20% of cases, the people swore up and down the line that they were not using THC, not intentionally using THC, and that they said they were only using commercial vapes. So I think there's a lot that we still don't know about EVALI. So it's just important to know. In terms of COVID, youth who vape are 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with COVID. And as we mentioned, since vaping damages the lungs and immune system, it makes it much harder when you do have COVID to fight it off. And smoking and vaping increase the spread of COVID, which is a really interesting thought, but people have constant hand-to-mouth contact and coughing. So that's a very easy way for COVID to spread. And we know that. Next slide. Okay.
So we certainly think we know what these devices look like, but do we? I mean, they are designed to look like things, pens, flash drives, things that we can certainly identify. Things like things that we wear. This is a book bag that is actually a vape. You simply just pull off of this. Pens, there are already pens in the picture, but that's a vape device. This is just a little disc. It's called UFO. On and on and on. Things that you would never think to look for are actually vape devices. So all meant to be concealed.
And then we want to look at, as Bruce just highlighted, literally they're hidden places. These devices can look like everyday products, which is even more scary. So we want to go into what are the 10 signs that your teen may be vaping. And one of the number one is their excessive time in the restroom. It's normally, of course, teens may be in the restroom, but when it becomes like 3 hours, something is not right. Or wanting to go outside all the time, and your teen, exactly their behavior pattern, but you can tell it's like a sneakiness that comes with this behavior, connected even with isolation. You may also even have a sweet smell, because some of these products, as we talked about, have these fruity flavors and things of that nature, that you can actually smell sweet smell if you go in the room. Use of candles or room fresheners to disguise smell. All of those things are signs. Dry mucous membranes, and what will happen is the propylene glycerol affects the nose, the throat, and the mouth, and so you'll be like getting this response from a teen often. And so what you'll see is drinking more, craving more salt or spices. Unfortunately, excessive use of the vaping can also lead to nosebleeds and mouth sores. So if that becomes an issue that your teen talks about, it can be associated with vaping. Unusual items like the colorful plastic cups, USB drives, and everything that Bruce just demonstrated, all those things are pens that they haven't opened, unfortunately can actually be vaping products. The next slide. A lot of the behavior or components definitely connect with the secretive aspects of vaping and the mood changes. So you'll see major attitude shifts, easily agitated, always wanting to be behind doors, not interfacing with the family or friends much, changes in sleep patterns. A lot of teens that vape often want to sleep a lot. And literally, like I said, the raspy coughing, the lung infections, chest pain is also associated with this, shortness of breath, pneumonia, immune response over time weakens for these young people who are vaping. And like I talked about earlier, it's very addictive. So they're not just doing it once or twice, they're doing it constantly. And this is where the impact of the signs come into play. You'll find anxiety, irritability, as I mentioned, and definitely changes in the eating habits. And one of the things I want to emphasize is, being aware of where kids are spending their money, because we have to ask ourselves, where do they get the money for doing this, right? So if they have a Venmo account, PayPal, Cash App, Apple Pay, things of that nature, please, if you are parents on apps, or even their credit cards, just check and see, how are their online spending habits, because this is where they're actually able to get access to vaping products as well. And it's not generally obvious what is in the package when they come, so they can just have things delivered. A lot of youth will say, I'm, ordering stuff off of Amazon, and in actuality, they're ordering vaping products, which don't require age verification or anything like that. So like I said, monitoring the spending habits of the teen is very important. Next slide, please. And then we want to talk about, what can parents do? As a parent, like I mentioned of myself, modeling the behavior is number one, right? We want to be able to live by example. We want to encourage open conversation. I have this method, 15 minutes to talk, 15 minutes to listen with teens. And what that is they can come to you for 15 minutes. Everything is on the table. You have to listen to them for 15 minutes, no judgment. openness and allow them to express what they may be going through their day, whatever they want for 15 minutes straight, because that connection, literally, and encouraging that conversation builds trust. 15 minutes to talk, 15 minutes to listen. And this is very effective, like I said, in building a level of comfort for our teens to be able to come to us non-judgmentally. Everything is on the table. And also they want to feel that this will be confidential, because a lot of times when we hear information coming from our teen, it can be sometimes shocking, but we're giving them the space to express themselves because we want to know what would lead to behaviors like this. And there is no shame, there is no blame. The attitude is we are here to support and want to be open and connecting. And that makes us a better advocate also. Obviously, being able to be frustrated about these situations that you're hearing and the impact that this is having. That's why we're so grateful for PAVe, the organization. So you're able to get involved literally as a parent advocate, as an educator, and we need parents, like you who want to see change, get involved. So please contact us. Our website is info@PAVe, or email us, and all that information I'm sure is in the chat, but this is how we can get involved and this is how we can change things for the better. Judy?
How can we talk to our kids about it? First of all, as the American Academy of Pediatrics states, we can start as early as 9. Because kids are aware of what's going on that young. And this is never going to be a one-time conversation. It's something that you begin and you revisit and come back to. And you do need to be respectful of, you can't just jump in and say like, well, let's talk about vaping. It has to be connected to something else. You need to consider your child's privacy. This could be a sensitive topic, but there's a great way of being opportunistic in the sense of looking at situations where you see vaping or you see advertising or you see devices and you can bring it up. And one thing that has been shown to be helpful for teens in particular in terms of vaping is that, and here it is, the teens are targeted. And if they start to realize that they have been targeted and that they're losing their autonomy because of that because of the addiction properties and that they've been specifically targeted, a lot of teens will start to get angry and upset, and they'll realize that kind of they've been played with, they've been toyed with, and that kind of anger can be marshaled to help them quit at that point. But it is important for you to understand exactly what's going on, and that's why we have PAVe to kind of educate the families and the parents to learn more about it, so you can be talking real facts and not just scare tactics.
And Judy, I would also like to add, like I mentioned, we want to, out of all this, obviously keeping that open line of communication. There definitely isn't not a single approach to this, but that open communication is the key to anything, and building that trust and alliance. And we ask questions, like I said, that 15 minutes to talk, 15 minutes to listen, make that your mantra. But be clear that we don't approve of vaping. We don't want to start by directly confronting their behavior, because of course, once you do that, that creates denial and just isolation and agitation, but definitely letting them know that this is something that's, that you don't approve of, but you want to be open to understand. And I believe that those conversations allow for young people to feel that adults can relate, because you were once young, right? And sometimes I feel like we're so out of touch with reality. Trust me, I can tell you mine do, that we want to be able to normalize it at their level. And you do that just by listening to what's going on in their world. And so, like I said, the best approach is to be able to have conversation. Obviously, we don't approve of this. We share with them their concerns, what is out there, being honest, not trying to, like you said, create scare tactics, but just honestly sharing with them this information that we're presenting today is eye-opening for them, and they're able to do the things that are necessary. Next slide.
We talked about not using scare tactics, and we talked about that they've been targeted, which can be a really helpful motive for people to realize that they definitely want to quit. And these are some Teen Quit resources. The Truth Initiative is an incredible organization, and this is Text to Quit, and Basically, This Is Quitting is on their iPhone, so using the same devices that they're really used to, and it gives them a lot of motivation and support. And here's the website for This Is Quitting. And then smokefree.gov has a similar smartphone app. And so these, I think the Truth Initiative one has actually been tested and it has actually shown some really good results. Does anybody else have a opinion on that?
Yes, yeah. So evidence-based, so that's great. Also in the state of, someone just put in the chat, what can we do for someone that's already addicted? So certainly that is a great resource. The Truth Initiative, This Is Quitting. Here's another one through the Ohio Department of Health, My Life, My Quit. It is a free resource for teens that are addicted. So My Life, My Quit. They can, it's a whichever that youth chooses to do, coaching, telephonic, or text program for those teens in Montgomery County. My Become an X is available. And let me back for a second. My Life, My Quit also has tips for parents whose teen is addicted. My Become an X has tips for parents whose teens are addicted to vaping. So those are 3 great tips. The government one, Smoke Free Gov, also has great mental health tips for, because it's also there are issues with mental health often for teens that are addicted to vaping and tobacco use. So it also has great resources there as well. There's also,
I just want to make sure we get to Wendy. Sorry.
okay, so yeah, so if anyone's interested on prevention curriculum for schools, that's there as well. Let's turn it, because we're so happy to have Wendy Hyde with us. Wendy, it's yours.
Hi, everyone. I won't take up too much more of your time. I know we're running a little bit short. I just want to introduce the organization that I work for is the Preventing Tobacco Addiction Foundation, Tobacco 21. We are an advocacy organization. We work locally as well as at the state level and national level to push meaningful enforcement of tobacco regulation laws. And specifically here in Ohio, we are working diligently in many different communities to pass tobacco retail license laws. License law for a community means that you really get to own what the tobacco landscape looks like in your community. So it also means that it's an ability for you to hold retailers accountable for not selling to your teens. And frankly, I've been working in health education for over 20 years. But my proudest accomplishments are my 4 teenage kids. And I do this work, frankly, to protect them from an industry that continues to advertise. It's almost impossible, right, to outspend the tobacco industry. But I would say that by working at utilizing tobacco retail licensing laws locally here in Ohio, we can learn to really outplay and outwit them with these local laws. I would love to connect with you, parents, as well as social service organizations, schools, etc., to give you some technical assistance, as well as to help you lobby with your local officials to pass these meaningful laws within your community. Please reach out to me. I can be found at Wendy Hyde, wendy.hyde@tobacco21.org, and I can share that information in the text. And also the next slide kind of gives you a brief overview. It's a short video of what tobacco retail licensing looks like here in Ohio and locally.
Wendy, do put that in put your email in the chat if you would. Great.
You need a license to go fishing or sell a martini. People need a license to sell hot dogs. So do those selling houses and cars. So why is it that sellers of deadly tobacco products don't need a meaningful license? Why is it someone selling addictive nicotine to kids gets, at worst, a slap on the wrist? Raising the sales age for nicotine and tobacco to 21 can help. but most cities and states don't enforce tobacco 21 laws. What good is that? Tobacco products kill 500,000 Americans each year, and the CDC says that 5.6 million kids alive today will die prematurely unless something changes. It's time to change the balance. For a start, let's find out who is selling these toxic, addictive products and where they are located. Most states and localities don't even have a complete list. That's done by making all nicotine and tobacco sellers get a license designed to protect kids, not just collect taxes. This is a tobacco retail license. TRL is a game changer. It makes every single nicotine and tobacco seller register with the health department. Tobacco, of course, is primarily a health issue. The license fee funds secret shopper inspections to make sure all retailers are following the rules. Most importantly, nicotine and tobacco sellers have to earn their license by being responsible. Those who keep breaking the law and continue to sell to kids can lose their license. Health departments need leverage to rein in irresponsible nicotine and tobacco retailers. Give them a license to protect.
So if you want more information, again, we know that the FDA is a slow and sluggish process and oftentimes doesn't really implement effective laws in a timely manner. Meanwhile, our children continue to become addicted to these deadly products. Please reach out to me. I would love to work with you. Parents, like I said, for me, it's the reason I got into it is to protect my own kids. So become an active member of your community, and I'm willing to assist you in that process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I know we're going a couple minutes over. I'm going to keep going because I know most people are still on the line. And I will talk to you in a moment about this FDA campaign we have going on, Back to School, Not Back to Juul. I want to give people a chance to use the QR code if you're interested in getting involved with PAVe. You can also email info@parentsagainst-vaping.org or Christina@parentsagainst-vaping.org. That's me. Or respond through the emails you've gotten from us about the event. So I hope you can get in touch. But there's a quick survey about becoming a volunteer there if you want it. I just wanted to show people the QR code. So speaking of the FDA, PAVe has been involved in this advocacy campaign for most of this year, but really intensely this summer and fall, because FDA is undertaking this PMTA product, pre-market tobacco application, to basically retroactively regulate all of these e-cigarettes, which flooded the market while it was sort of open season. So right now, any e-cigarette companies have had to submit an application for any product. So that includes like Juul submitting an application for their tobacco flavored flavor pod, for their menthol flavored flavor pod, for any company that sells disposables. Each disposable device in a different flavor has to have an application. And the applications are supposed to show that that product specifically carries a benefit to public health. And so we've had this campaign ongoing asking the FDA to reject all flavored e-cigarette products, which would include all menthol products and Juul. But because flavors addict kids, they're a huge reason that young people start vaping. And so we've been sending letters to the FDA. Over 2,000 people sent letters to the FDA this fall. This is some of the language from the letter, but we rely on the FDA to protect public health, especially for our kids. So we're asking them to deny it. Their deadline to do that actually passed. It was September 9th. So now we're shifting and asking people to send comments to the White House and urging President Biden to direct the FDA to deny these products because their time is up. They've had years, and we know that every day that these products are still on the market is more potential kids getting addicted and being harmed by e-cigarettes. So if you want to check out that campaign, you can go to our website, parentsagainst-vaping.org, and there are like banner messages about it all over. So you can see the campaign, you can leave a comment with the White House, you can call their comment line. We'd love for you to take part in that. This is some of our campaign materials. We've had plenty of volunteers, pediatricians, parents join in and speak to their own experience and testimony about why we want FDA to do this, because it obviously really is a very personal thing that affects the health and lives of so many kids and families. So we're on social media. this on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. We also have a podcast, Big Tobacco Mess with the Wrong Moms. If you're interested in diving deeper, there are interviews with families who have been deeply affected by this, with moms and dads. There are interviews with elected officials who have been champions on this issue. There's all sorts of sort of deep dives if you want more information. So we're way over now. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you from me to all of our speakers, Wendy, Dr. Monica, Dr. Judy, and Bruce. This is a great event. We're so happy that you attended, and we'll follow up over email with next steps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.